Hello, welcome back everyone. So let's continue with chapter 3 of psychology, which is about learning and memory. If need be, we can come back to chapter 2, but I have reviewed this in my long time, quite a while ago. So now I will be focusing on chapter 3. So let's start that we are going to learn about learning actually. And the fact that we are also going to be talking about memory. And so yeah, it's only these two main concepts. So let's start actually with learning. So we have habituation and dishabituation. So habituation comes from making something as your habit. So basically you get used to a stimulus, right? That's pretty easy. Then we have dishabituation, where you kind of break the habit of getting used to the thing, right? So when a second stimulus intervenes, causing a resensitization of the original stimulus. So for quite a while, you were dishabituated, and when you were dishabituated, when the next stimulus comes after a while, it causes some resensitization, and suddenly you uh, get resensitized to the original stimulus. So for quite a while, for example, you don't ring the bell for the dog to salivate over the food, and as a sign of salivating over the food, like when you're bringing the food, you ring the bell. Now you just don't do it for quite a while, so you stop ringing the bell, and the dog is dishabituated. And when you ring the bell after some time, then you start to actually get resensitized. The dog gets resensitized very quickly. Then we have associative learning. Sorry, I was a bit distracted for a couple minutes. Focus. Okay. So now we have associative learning, where you pair together stimuli and the responses or behaviors and consequences. Okay. Then we have operant conditioning. So operant conditioning is when your behavior is changed through the use of consequences. So operant conditioning is basically ringing the bell and associating some reinforcement and punishment with it. Actually, classical conditioning is Pavlov's dog. So down here, when with repetition, a neutral stimulus like ringing a bell becomes a conditioned stimulus that produces a conditioned response. So both the conditioned stimulus and the neutral stimulus are the same thing, but the conditioned response is different than the unconditioned response. So the unconditioned response over ringing a like over ringing the bell was nothing, right? But after a while, the conditioned response becomes the salivation, right? So here, the classical Pavlovian, the experimenter arranges a relationship between two stimuli, the conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus. So the tone of the bell, the ring of the bell, means that there is a food coming, and the conditioned response is salivation, and the unconditioned response is uh, the food, or just the salivation again. Okay, for operant, it's instrumental. You're punishing or rewarding your subject, right? And the experimenter arranges relationship between a stimulus, the reinforcer, and a response. For example, bar press leads to food. So it's time for food. I should press the lever. That's what the mice does. That's the operant conditioning. So the mice is trained with the food as a reward to press the lever in order to receive the cheese, right? And in operant conditioning, the behavior is changed through the use of consequences. So the behavior of the mice, for example, is changed through the use of the lever. So the mice is trained to use the lever because before that, they didn't even know what the lever did, right? And we have reinforcement, which increases the likelihood of the behavior, and punishment decreases the likelihood of the behavior. Now, for a schedule, we have here that the schedule of reinforcement can be based on an amount of time or a ratio of behavior slash to behavior to reward. So based on the time, we have temporal, right? And based on the ratio, it's the ratio of behavior to reward. Like how many times do I have to press the lever in order to receive the cheese, says the mice. And it can be either fixed or variable. So if it's fixed every 5 times, right on the dot, not 4, not 6, every 5 times you receive the cheese. But variable, for the first try, for example, you receive the cheese after 2 tries, but then the next one you receive the cheese after 10 tries, 10 presses, and then etc. Positive response is adding something, right? And negative response is removing something. Extinction, and keep in mind it's a response. Now we have extinction. It is when a previously reinforced behavior is no longer reinforced. It goes extinct. It's pretty self-explanatory. Then we have shaping. In operant conditioning, shaping is when a behavior that is closer and closer to the target behavior is reinforced. So that's when you are shaping your mice to, and it's definitely in operant conditioning, you're shaping the mice to hit the lever closer and closer, press it better, for example, or fully to receive the cheese. Then we have classical conditioning. With repetition, a neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus that produces a conditioned response. And observational learning or modeling is the acquisition of behavior by watching others. This one I did not know about. I don't think I saw it in the flashcards. But something that just came to my mind is basically the fact that in life you're always being conditioned. For example, you're being conditioned by your phone, your messages, your friends, social media, internet, the YouTube videos you watch, everything, right? And if you're not being conditioned in one way, you're definitely being conditioned in another way. It's just up to you to choose what you want to be conditioned in. That's kind of profound. Then let's get into memory. So for memory, we have encoding, which is the process of putting new information into memory. And we know memory is the place in our brain that's responsible for memory is hippocampus, right? We might get to it here, but we know from the biology, nervous system chapter, or from the, I think it was in biochemistry, we have that, right? Or even in the psychology section in the previous chapter. Is it previous chapter in the senses? Most likely, or maybe even the first chapter. So yeah, the brain organization. We had it in the first chapter. Cool. Now let's continue with encoding. So encoding, you're basically putting new information into your memory. It can be automatic or effortful. So you automatically see a license plate of a car when you're driving. You're not putting any effort into it, or you're putting actually effort into memorizing things that you're learning here for the MCAT or any other exam that you're taking. Then we have semantic encoding, which is stronger than both acoustic and visual encoding. That's pretty interesting because visual encoding uh, is by itself pretty powerful, because if you are putting effort into visualizing something like your mimetic memory, it actually should be good for some extent of time, right? But also, the interesting thing, something that I personally was involved in the research of, is the combination of visual and acoustic encoding that is more powerful by any of them single handedly. So, but the point here is to even know that semantic encoding, which we do have it here for facts and concepts, which is a subtype of declarative memory with episodic memory. And declarative memory is under explicit memory, so it's conscious, you're making an effort. And those are all a subsection, a subsequent, a subsequence of long-term memory. And sensory and short-term memory, we do have transient and based on neurotransmitter activity. So our sensory and short-term memory are transient and based on neurotransmitter activity. Then we have working memory, which requires short-term memory, attention, and executive function to manipulate information. So working memory is more like a short-term memory, and you need sensory memory, attention, and executive function to manipulate information. So you get some information, but in order to manipulate it, you need to process it through your working memory. And these are very relatable nowadays in the world of AI, right? Since the machine, the artificial intelligence, is having some sort of information coming into it, and then it's processing it with some, not attention per se, but doing some executive function on it. Then we have long-term memory, which requires elaborate rehearsal and is the result of increased neuronal connectivity. And it does require elaborate rehearsal, right? That's how we can put things into our long-term memory, by trying to bring meanings to it and attaching meanings to it. Semantic encoding is the strongest, right? And there are two subtypes. So the chain of human memory, the cascade, is firstly sensory memory, is less than a second. Then less than a minute we have short-term memory, aka working memory. I try to understand what is the main difference between working memory and short-term memory, but it's tricky. A lot of articles, papers say that these are the same, but the subtle differences would be probably that short-term memory is kind of also sensory memory, but working memory requires, as we mentioned, some executive function, attention, and you need to put a bit more time on it, right? And however, then we have long-term memory, which is a lifetime thing. So here, your long-term memory is subdivides to two types, which is the explicit and implicit. Implicit is unconscious, and the category, the title for it is um, procedural memory, which requires you to memorize skills, tasks, and they become probably like pragmatic stuff comes here into our procedural memory. It becomes unconscious to you, or being able to play some sports. Then explicit memory is conscious and subdivides itself into uh, declarative memory, and declarative memory subdivides into for events and facts to episodic. For events and experiences, it's episodic. It's like episodes, but as we had it there for semantic memory, which is kind of related to semantic encoding, it's for concepts and facts, and it's stronger than acoustic and visual encoding. And explicit is it makes sense, right? Because you don't remember the license plate of the car you saw today, but you do actually remember a concept that you're learning for the MCAT, uh, regardless of how in depth you are trying to remember it, right? Then we have, yeah, so explicit declarative memory. It accounts for memories that we must consciously recall with effort and focus, and implicit is non declarative memory. It accounts for acquired skills and conditioned responses to circumstances and stimuli. And for semantic networks, we store facts, right? And we had it here that semantic memory is responsible for facts. And concepts are linked together based on similar meaning. It's like a neuronal network. And we do have certain triggers that will activate associated memories. That's when these triggers are actually pretty good method for us to memorize and remember a lot of the concepts on the MCAT. And mnemonics probably is an example of having these triggers. We do have retrieval, which is the recognition of information that is stronger than recall. So recognizing an information is stronger than recall. That's pretty interesting to know. And retrieval is often based on priming interconnected nodes of the semantic network. And we have some diseases. So to put it in other words, you have to prime the information that you're trying to remember, and then the priming allows the interconnected nodes of the semantic network to give you that retrieval of information or concepts, which is our part of our declarative memory, and the subtype of it being the semantic memory. For diseases, so like I just had to look at the semantic word here just to kind of remember the name for the semantic. It's pretty funny because I am kind of forgetting that semantic memory is called semantic memory. Just to go on it again, let's do it a reverse flow. So semantic memory is for facts and concepts, both semantic and episodic memory. Episodic being for events and experiences. They both form the declarative memory, and then declarative memory with procedural memory, they form they go up to procedural goes up to unconscious implicit memory, and declarative goes to explicit conscious memory, and they both go to long-term memory. Cool. And this is for memory. These are actually important. So we have Alzheimer's, the infamous Alzheimer's. It's a degenerative brain disorder linked to a loss of acetylcholine in neurons that link to hippocampus, causes dementia and memory loss. Korsakoff syndrome, memory loss caused by thiamine deficiency in the brain. So acetylcholine is related to Alzheimer's. Thiamine is related to Korsakoff's. Sorry for that. Okay, that doesn't matter. Let's do Korsakoff's here. So thiamine deficiency causes retrograde amnesia. So retrograde probably means that you start not remembering from now to the past, and anterograde amnesia. So it's both retrograde and anterograde. Anterograde would be different. It would be the fact that now I tell you something and you don't remember it, right? Another symptom is confabulation. I actually know what this is. Confabulation is making up memories, the fabrication of vivid but fake memories. That's very interesting. I got to know this a couple of years ago, and still it stuck with me. Then we have agnosia, which is the loss of ability to recognize objects, people, or sounds, usually caused by physical damage to the brain. So, agnosia is loss of ability to recognize objects, people, or sounds. So, you can't recognize people, sounds, objects, usually caused by physical damage to brain. Yeah, so this is actually famous. You've seen it in movies or somewhere, right? Uh, there's a hit to the brain of the patient, and suddenly it results in agnosia, and they cannot recognize their family members or their husband or their other significant, right? And we have interference. So we have retroactive interference. Does it go to retrograde? New memories make you forget old memories. So retroactive, retro, it means your old memories are affected, you forget them. Proactive is that old memories interfere with learning new memories. So it's like your grandpa when he's talking about things like you are back in the 50s, but you're not in the 50s, right? So it's proactive. The old memory is affecting the new memory. Nice. So we are done with the memory chapter. We can go to chapter 4, which is about cognition in consciousness and language. So for cognition, this is when we have the good developmental stages, right? Let me just grab some water and I'll be right back. Or maybe I should just finish this and then I'll go for the water. So let's start with cognition. So we have the information processing model. It's just like a computer. The brain encodes, stores, and retrieves information much like a computer. Perfect. We have Piaget's stages. They involve schemas and assimilation versus accommodation. Think, assimilation is like copying, but accommodation is more, it's more like an adult thing. So we can dig into it more later, but let's do Piaget stages. So it's sensory motor, 0 to 2 years old. Then we have pre-operational, which is 2 to 7 years old. Then we have, after pre-operational, we have concrete operational, which is 7 to 11 years old. And then we have formal operational, formal or abstract, right? But it's after 11 years old. So 0 to 2, 2 to 7, 7 to 11, and 11 and above. And for 0 to 2 sensory motor, it's pretty obvious. Child manipulates the environment to meet physical needs through circular reactions. So they repeat reacting to the physical environments, and they also show object permanence, which develops at the end of this stage. So object permanence means so the milestone is that object permanence occurs after sensory motor. So these kids, when they come into 2 to 7 years old, if you pour them uh, water, the same amount of water, into a tall glass compared to a fat glass, but it's the same amount of water, they think that the tall glass has more water inside it. Then we have 2-7 pre-operational. They pretend to play symbolic thinking so they learn to talk. Egocentrism and centration is also here. They only see themselves, right? Then we have the concrete operational. So with concrete operational, 7 to 11 years old, they understand they do understand the feelings of others, and conservation develops, like math. They start to understand that um, things actually stay the same, and it's the same amount of water in the glasses. And for formal operational, it's abstract thinking, problem solving, and moral reasoning. They know that it's ethical to do something or not. And then we have problem solving. So the types of problem solving: trial and error, algorithms, deductive reasoning, and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is to form conclusions from rules, and inductive reasoning is to form conclusions from evidence. So in top down and bottom up processing, um, deductive reasoning, I think, is bottom up, since you I think inductive is bottom up, since you are going from evidence, from what you are seeing, right? So I have here ChatGPT on my side in my phone, and induction is bottom up. So it begins with specifics and building towards generalizations. So the specifics is the evidence that you're seeing, and bottom up is just like what you're saying right now, and you form conclusions based on all the generalizations that you are saying right now, all the specifics that you're saying right now. And induction is like a pyramid, right? It's like a triangle. But deductive reasoning is like a funnel, upside down triangle. And you deduce something based on rules. So you have principles and rules, and one of them is always correct. It's based on certainty, and it is deduction that goes from rules and it's always certain. But induction, going from evidence, from what you're seeing right now, and being a top down approach, actually is bottom up with inductive, but so the whole bottom up concept is, so when you say, for example, induction is bottom up, it's like a, sorry, let me just try to understand this. So induction involves drawing general conclusions from specific observations. Cool. So we know that whatever specific information you have is the evidence that you have right now is, first of all, induction, and induction is bottom up. So from the bottom, from however, induction is induction is bottom up, and induction is like a pyramid. So however, you start with specifics and then you make a conclusion. It's kind of tricky because bottom up, like a pyramid, it's at the bottom. If you're starting, it means that you're, it's like generalizations, right? But the tip is actually the sign of generalizations. Okay. Um, View it as when you go to the top, you can generalize everything, right? You can see everything. You can see everything at the bottom. But from the bottom, you cannot see much else on the other side, for example, right? And top down being deduction, deductive reasoning, is a top down approach, and it's like a funnel, right? So from the bottom you can see everything, you can make all the generalizations, and it's from rules, and all those rules are what you use to, and that's why deductive reasoning is always correct, because you go by the rules and principles, right? So if you're seeing a robin and you decide that it's a bird, you have a bunch of rules that shows you, that tells you that it has a wing and it looks like other birds. So now you make the uh, decision, the conclusion that the robin is a bird. But if you see a bunch of birds and you decide that they look similar and they're robins, it's based on what you're seeing right now. And that's what leads you to deciding that uh, the robin, these birds in front of you are robins. So this is what ChatGPT told me. Deduction is like recognizing a specific bird as a robin based on general bird characteristics. So a specific bird is a robin. That's deduction because you go based on general bird characteristics. But induction is observing multiple robins and concluding that all robins have certain features. Because based on what you're seeing, you decide that they have certain features. Cool. We can practice this more in with examples and questions. We have mental set, which is a pattern of approach for a given problem. We have functional fixedness, the tendency to use objects only in the way they are normally utilized, creates barriers to problem solving. Functional fixedness, the tendency to use objects only in the way they are normally utilized. It creates barriers to problem solving. Makes sense because you're fixed on a function, and your tendency to use that object only in the way they are usually used, and this creates barriers to problem solving because you have to think outside of out of the box and creatively, right? Heuristics, rules of thumb, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You just need to memorize this, I think, and become familiar with it. Heuristics are rules of thumb. We have different heuristics. We have availability heuristics, so whatever is available at your hand, whatever is in front of you, you believe it. When we make our decision based on how easily similar instances can be imagined. Then we have representativeness heuristic, the tendency to make decisions about actions, events based on our standard representations of the events. So if a certain race implies a certain food or culture about them, then you use representativeness heuristics. Like racism can be probably an example of this. Confirmation bias, the tendency to focus on information that fits an individual's beliefs while rejecting information that goes against those beliefs. So whatever personal beliefs you have goes with confirmation bias. We have Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. There are 7 areas of intelligence: linguistic, logical, mathematical, musical, visual, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic, interpersonal, and intrapersonal. The intrapersonal one is interesting, and it was not something that I kind of had in the front of my head memory. We have consciousness. Um, so we can be alert. It's the state of being awake and thinking. EEG shows beta waves. It's important when you're alert, you're beta. When alert or concentrating, alpha waves when awake but tired. So you're alpha, you're spending too much energy, and you're awake but you're tired. And your eyes are closed. Beta is increased frequency but low amplitude, and alpha is synchronous. Interesting. Sleep is more info on the right here for sleep. Hypnosis, individuals appear to be in normal control of their faculties but are in a highly suggestible state. They actually, this kind of on the ocean personality characteristics, your agreeableness is like to the max, right? Used for pain control, hypnosis, psychological therapy, memory enhancement. Meditation, quieting of the mind. Used for relief or of anxiety. So hypnosis says individuals appear to be in normal control of their faculties. For consciousness altering drugs, we have depressants, alcohol, barbiturates, benzodiazepines. They increase GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, right? Stimulants, we have amphetamines, cocaine, ecstasy. They increase dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin at synaptic cleft. And opiates and opioids, heroin, morphine, opium, oxycodone, and hydrocodone. They can cause death by respiratory depression. Hallucinogens, LSD, peyote, mescaline, ketamine. Mesolimbic pathway mediates drug addiction, includes nucleus accumbens. Medial forebrain bundle and ventral tegmental area. Dopamine is the main neurotransmitter for addiction. The mesolimbic pathway mediates drug addiction. Interesting. For language, we have phonology, so phone, the sound probably, the actual sound of speech, yes. Morphology, the shape, the building blocks of words. Semantics, the meaning of words. Syntax is the rules dictating word order. So syntax is the rules. Pragmatics, changes in language delivery depending on context. Pragmatics, change in language delivery depending on context. Oh, how you say things. Theories of language development. Nativist biological theory. Language acquisition is innate. Learning behaviorist theory. So nativist says that language acquisition is innate, is inside of us. I think it's by it's a professor that he's actually giving opinions about Trump and everything, the political order right now. Noam Chomsky. I think it is Noam Chomsky who said that. Then we have learning behaviorist theory. Language acquisition is controlled by operant conditioning and reinforcement by parents and caregivers. So learning behaviorist theory. So we learn it by parents and caregivers. Social interactionist is by learning through friends, probably, called motivation to communicate and interact with others. Whorfian hypothesis, linguistic relativity, the lens by which we view and interpret the world is created by language. How we view the world is created by language. Oh, nice. Whorfian. This is like the positive mindset that I'm talking about. Broca's area produces speech. Wernicke's area, language comprehension. So you want to produce something. So it's Broca. With Broca, you produce. With Wernicke's, you understand language. We have arcuate fasciculus. It connects Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Interesting. And aphasia. So it's language deficit. You have Broca's aphasia, so difficult to generate speech. It's obvious you can't produce speech. Wernicke's, you can't understand language, lack of comprehension. And conduction aphasia, you can't repeat words. For sleep, we have beta, alpha, theta, delta. BAT-D is the mnemonic for sequential order of brain waves. So stage 1 is light sleep, it's theta waves. We know when you're awake, it's beta. When your eyes are closed, but you're awake and tired, it's alpha. Then stage 2 is slightly deeper, it's still theta waves. Spindle sleep, spindles. K complexes. Your heart rate goes down, your respiration goes down, your body temperature goes down. And stages 3 and 4 is deep sleep, delta waves, BATS-D, slow wave sleep, SWS. Slow wave sleep is known as delta. And stage 3 and 4. Most sleep disorders occur during stage 3 and 4. Non-rapid eye movement sleep. Growth hormone released. Interesting. So you need non-REM sleep for growth hormone. REM sleep. The mind appears awake on EEG, but the person is asleep. Eye movements and body paralysis. Non-rapid eye movement. Appears awake, but asleep. Mostly beta waves. Or REM. It's beta waves mostly. Like you're awake. Sleep cycle is 90 minutes. Stages 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, REM. So 1, theta waves, 2, theta waves, 3 and 4, delta waves. Then 3 is delta again, still. 2 is theta, and rem is beta. Or 1, 2, 3, 4 rem. Or you go 1 theta, 2 theta, 3 and 4 delta, and rem beta. Circadian rhythm is 24 hours. Melatonin triggers sleepiness. Cortisol promotes wakefulness. Dreaming. So what's against melatonin is cortisol. Our cortisol levels go up when we wake up, right? Dreaming is mostly during REM. Interesting. Activation synthesis theory. Dreams result from brain activation during REM sleep. Activation in brainstem, synthesis and cortex. So our activation of dreams is in brainstem and synthesis is in cortex. Cortex synthesis, brainstem activation. Sleep disorders, dysomnias, difficult to fall asleep, stay asleep, or avoid sleep. It's like insomnia, narcolepsy, sleep apnea. Parasomnias, abnormal movements or behaviors during sleep, night terrors, sleepwalking. Parasomnia is about your paranormal activities like movements, about your movements. Alertness, selective attention allows one to pay attention to particular stimulus while determining if additional stimuli in the background require attention. Selective is like the white noise that you hear or listen to while studying. It allows one to pay attention to particular stimulus while determining if additional stimulus in the background, like if there is someone shooting a gun into Starbucks, then obviously you're gonna turn your head. And divided is have your undivided attention. It's basically using automatic processing to pay attention to multiple activities at one time, like driving and talking on the phone. And yeah, automatic processing. Did we have automatic processing somewhere here? No, yeah. Cool. We're done with chapter 4 too. Just gonna mark it and like stuff. So I'll see you in the next one. Peace.